Welcome, 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 everyone, guys, to Two Guys in Hockey Talk, Season 6, Episode 24. I am Pawel the Cat, and my wonderful, insightful co-host is Evan REV Renaerts. Evan, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing awesome, man. Excited to be back. This is the trade deadline, so hats off to all you guys that are jumping on here tonight. We're going to ask you to give us about 20 to 25 minutes before we get into all the NHL trade talk. This deadline comes up on Friday. But, Pawel, this is what I think about when I think about trade deadline. I think that all these guys being traded, let's move them back about 10 to 12 years earlier, some of them 4 to 5, some of them maybe 14. And these guys were playing in youth or high school or college hockey. And that's 100%. Where we're going to be going today. So why don't you give everybody a heads up how they can follow us here?
We are here every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. You can find us on Facebook, on YouTube. We're looking for subscribers to join us there to get all our latest content. We got some shorts, reels. We are on a Two Guys in Hockey Talk website. You can find articles that are ongoingly posted throughout the week. And you can look at our sponsors, Edmonton Web Design, Penny Billionaires. You guys heard their intro song, Invincible, great song, Cal Casco Badler, some great hockey. And, of course, the wonderful Puckpedia, amongst other partners. If you want to join up with us, please reach out to us at twoguysinhockeytalk.com. We love connecting with you. We love partnerships. We want to continue to grow. But right now we're growing with a great new guest. So let's get to Guest Headliner.
Guest Headliner, brought to you by JR Web Design. Is your website stuck in the Stone Age? Well, you need JR Web Designs. They'll craft you a website that's as awesome as our show. Hey everyone, tonight's guest headliner is Jesse Peters of the Hockey High School podcast with Coach Peters, former head coach in youth, high school, ACHA, 25 years in coaching. We've connected through X, which my buddy likes to still call Twitter. I don't know if he's just twitted off by the fact that it got changed over or what. But Coach Peters, still good to have you on with us here at Two Guys in Hockey Talk.
Thank you. Good to be on, boys. Appreciate the invite.
We love having coaches on, and we're going to get right into it. But you are the host of the High School Hockey Podcast. Could you tell our listeners what that is about and what inspired you to start this fun podcast? What do you guys cover, and what can fans expect when they're tuning in?
Yeah, so basically, back in our old days, I don't want to date myself, but I turned 50 next week. So we used to clip out newspaper clippings in the paper, and our mom used to put it in a scrapbook and keep it for us. Those days are long gone. Even the high school kids, when I describe it to them, look at me with like I have 4 eyes, so which I do. But anyways, 5 eyes, and they basically what the plan was to make like a digital scrapbook to give the guys recognition, to give the kids their flowers, as they say nowadays, and to boost them up, to give them a platform to come on, talk about hockey, talk about their teams, maybe talk about some players or some stories that we don't know about from the Connecticut high school hockey scene. And that, of course, that all comes off the rear of all my coaching experience. I have 3 kids now, and kind of the coaching kind of went to the wayside after that, and I wanted to find a way to still be involved in the high school and youth hockey scene. So pretty much I focused on the high school side, and that's what we do. We have kids on, talk about them, about their teams, and give them recognition. I've given out a scholarship in the past for $2,500 to a needy high school player. I organized an all-star game that we had. We've done some other various charity work. So just try to get out in the community like that as well. So that's basically what we do. If you go over to Connecticut High School Hockey Podcast, and we do some interviews also with some former players. We had one of our former high school hockey players that now plays for UConn on the podcast last year. So we Jake Percival plays for UConn. We had him on last year. Good player, and that's basically what we do in a nutshell.
Sweet. And that actually sounds like a lot of fun. So listen, Coach, you've dedicated, as you mentioned, over 25 years to coaching, at youth, high school, college, even looking back like in your ACHA. What's the single most significant shift you think you've observed? You talked about age in how young players learn and develop hockey skills now over that time. And how has it impacted coaching approaches?
So it is, you see this constantly going on. The days of being able to go in there and tell the players that hey, we're not putting any pucks on the ice, and everybody skate until you throw up, and we're gonna skate blue line, red line, blue line, red line 100 times over, and don't talk to me. I'm not your friend. I'm your coach. Those days are over. You really need to relate to the players now. You really need to be able to communicate with them, be more aware of social media, what's going on social media, bring new technology as far as the coaching end is concerned, connecting with video, being a lot more in touch with video. And the players they're very savvy. If you're not connected on those ends and keeping yourself up to snuff, they're going to sniff it out pretty quick.
And so when you're working with these kids, because of course a lot of them, the dream is let's play in the NHL, let's get onto it. And we know it's competitive, we know it's intense. What are some of the common misconceptions you see in young players, and maybe even their families, parents, guardians, whoever's overseeing them, about the paths to higher levels of hockey? And what is the consistent messaging that you should give to them or you want to convey to them?
So it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, because I'll give you the most common one that I see in going on to college and playing at the ACHA level, which again, as you guys know, and I'm sure a lot of your fans know, it's not the NCAA level. It's actually the club level. It's been so competitive at that level now, even that the talent's got so compressed. A lot of kids leave the high school level and they think, oh, I'm just going to go play for this team, or I'm going to go walk onto this team. I'm like, it ain't like that anymore, man. I'm like, you better be ready to encounter, as an 18-year-old high school player, maybe a 21-year-old ACHA player. And the swing on that is huge. It's huge. And it kind of goes, me and Evan were talking a little bit about before the show, a little bit about some different topics. And it kind of goes in line with what we were talking about with the junior. Compressing all that talent down. Now you got the junior players coming into the NCAA D1 level, right? Now those D1 talent gets pressed down to the D3 level. Now that D3 talent gets pressed down to the ACHA level. So as little as you think that's not going to have, how's that going to affect this guy at the high school level? Well, it does, because now those players get less opportunities at the ACHA level because all that talent is now being pushed down, if that makes sense.
100%. And maybe you can give Evan some tips on how to podcast properly, so he can, maybe he can podcast a little bit better next week.
I think Evan's great. Evan's great. You guys are great, man. I love what you guys do.
I appreciate
it. All
it.
right. So in your experience, what are the differences in building a successful team? Because we know at this stage and being younger, right, you got to build that team culture. So say specifically around youth and high school, as it maybe even compared to ACHA, what are some of the core values you got to prioritize to build that team culture to instill in the players?
One of the favorite things I always like to say is it's high school hockey, not hockey high school. So prioritizing high school and the academics over the athletics, and making sure that's always number one, and then of course your family one, hockey two, or school two, hockey three. You got to making sure they have their priorities in order, making sure that hockey isn't the be all end all of everything. I mean, because at the end of the day, like we just said, kind of in passing, is in the previous topic, was we're trying to create people, right? We're not thinking every one of these kids has a shot at the NHL, because let's be realistic. That's a very far off dream for the players that I'm coaching. But you want to make sure that you're at the same time, while you're coaching, you're creating an environment and an atmosphere where you're making good kids, good citizens, and that's really the goal of it all.
And so in your time of coaching, have there been any unique or unusual stories, and maybe now you can go back on and laugh, behind the bench, that you've had experiences coaching that you feel comfortable sharing, of course?
Yeah, so I'll give it wasn't really funny, but we did have some controversy. I can give you a controversial story from Connecticut from last year. So the big story here was that we had a player who attempted to play a 5th year of high school. He transferred high schools, and they didn't realize that he had actually used up all his eligibility, and ended up playing about 3/4 of the season with one of the teams, and they had to forfeit all of those games. They were the number 1 seed in their division. They ended up playing like their final game of the year. They had to win to make the state tournament. They
Oh, boy.
did. They qualified, and they ended up winning the whole thing.
boy. Oh boy, this sounds like
So-
a Billy Madison kind of situation.
Yeah, it's crazy. So that again, that kind of goes that way. I love covering the. You only get that in high school, right? You only get that in high school. I mean, you know, the parents attacking the refs and the bad behavior. You know, you don't really look for that, but these unique stories of like a crazy rule like that, or you know, even a couple years back, we had a kid who played for the team that I coached. He had a mechanical hand. He had lost his hand with a birth defect, and he was playing with an actual claw for a top hand, which was an amazing story. He was playing varsity hockey, you know, high school varsity hockey with that disability and playing at a good clip. So you see things like that, and the tragedies. We had a local kid, and here's one from this past offseason. We had a kid who plays for Wethersfield. His dad's a firefighter, tragically passed away on duty. So you see the community come together for something like that. And again, all of these reasons, right? The funny stories, the tragedies, the kid with the disability, the giving back. These are all the reasons why I really love the high school game and coaching at that level. And that's why I go out and do what I do, basically.
I'm just going to have, before Evan gets to his question, I hope that kid with the mechanical arm wasn't asked to fight, because I don't know if he could sucker punch someone. If you don't know and you're not dropping the gloves, you're like, you don't want me to drop the gloves.
So no fighting at the high school level, but yeah, and it was just a miraculous story.
It's always amazing. I remember this was in British Columbia when I was fairly young. And just when you go to those, even the adult men's leagues, right? You know, senior men's leagues and stuff. I remember how violent it got. There's like 2,000 people in Cranbrook, British Columbia. The game, I think this was like 1983. Bob Murdoch actually was playing in that game. That shows my age. And it was interesting because the whole crowd, like, I'd never heard anything swearing or anything at a game. And they were so mad, and so they started yelling BS, but the full word, you know, constantly in the stage. Hey, Zylstra, welcome, Lust Trucker. So anyway, so they started doing it, and then a shoe went on the ice, another shoe went on the ice, some clothes went on the ice. I mean, I don't know. I was fairly young. I could have been underwear on the ice, but there was like and then bottles, because they sold bottles back in the early 80s in those places. So broken bottles, you know. It's crazy what happens with some fans and how passionate they get if it doesn't go their way.
Well, I didn't divulge to you coming from Connecticut. I am with my age. I am a diehard, and when I was a young kid, a season ticket holder as a Hartford Whalers fan. Oh. So that's where the original love of the game came from. And my parents got divorced when I was real young, so that was something me and my dad did together. Was go to Whalers games. So that's how I really started loving the game.
So may I quickly ask you your thoughts on when the Canes kind of wear those jerseys to honor the organization?
Stolen valor.
Yeah.
Stolen valor. They should not be able to wear those.
Okay.
That is, it's like watching somebody walk around in one of your dead relatives' skin masks. It's horrible. Yeah. I don't even watch the highlights. I'll be honest with you. I won't watch the highlights. I don't even want to see another team wearing that uniform.
Well, it is interesting. You look at, say, the Colorado Avalanche, right? So they'll have a Colorado Rocky jersey as well. Yet that you believe, I mean, that just shows you how merchandise and sales go with the NHL and licensing, because they actually have the licensing to the Colorado Rockies, which actually became the New Jersey Devils.
Yes.
Like, how's that? You just choose that for too cheap of a team? I know Wayne Gretzky back in the late 80s called them a Mickey Mouse organization. Maybe they were. They chose not to buy the licensing.
I do remember a funny story from back in the day about you guys are Oiler Edmonton people, so I do remember the Whalers beating the hell out of the Oilers one time, and then it was like a 10-11 to nothing, something like that, or 11-2. Long story short, the AP reported the score backwards over the wire because they thought that couldn't be correct. That's a true story. You can look that up.
Okay.
I actually remember that game because at that point I was actually a Calgary Flames fan. So, In my
But a
youth.
lot of heartache as a Whalers fan. And the sad part, to go together and to tie it together with what I do, the sad part is, you had a lot of kids growing up with an NHL team right in their backyard. Now you got these kids growing up and, they're kind of torn between Boston and New York. We have the Wolfpack. Yeah, that's great and all that. And they do a lot for the community. But to not have an NHL team, it certainly definitely hurts the hockey interest in the sport, not having an AHL team here anymore. So keeping that alive and keeping the hockey spirit alive during, is also part of the drive to do what I do.
Yeah, and we go ahead, Evan.
Sorry, I was gonna say, is there any money like with someone to buy a franchise that like in Winnipeg where they can actually make it go in a small market? Because I don't hear that for sponsors too.
No, I mean I don't hear rumor of any of those teams coming here. We hear sniffs of that, but I don't think you'll see a team in Hartford again. I really don't.
Well, and we here on Two Guys, like we are based in Edmonton, so of course we follow Edmonton. But for us, we really focus on the players, just because there's players that I grew up on, even though I grew up watching Oilers, that just revolutionized the game for what it is now and just how they play. Peter Forsberg, the way he played, like I hated him, but he was beautiful on the ice. Mike Modano, couldn't stand the Stars because they continued to whoop up the Oilers in the 90s. And yet the way he played and the way he brought the game, the way he controlled the puck, it was magnificent. The Sedin brothers, the tape-to-tape passes behind the nets where they were able to clear each other, and they said, oh, they're too small. These guys will never do anything. These guys did unreal things. And so you watch these players and the way they shape the game. And so this next generation is what we try to watch in order to bring it. But I digress. I know Evan had one more question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Why don't we do this? We started off, you had mentioned, you and I talked pre-show earlier here tonight. And so why don't we finish with a discussion around this before we could probably go on for an hour, Coach. So we'll maybe look at another time and really focus in on something specific as maybe even around the playoffs and some coaching strategies and stuff that we see in pro sports. So here's the question, and this is the evolving landscape we talked about now with college hockey with the new NCAA rules. I know we're getting calls. I have connections with some of the different groups in the USHL and the North American Hockey League, BCHL, of some stuff. Now we might be able to be. It looks like we might be getting the president of the ACHA coming in.
That's awesome.
Now the thing is, maybe help clear up two things. So with the recent rule changes and shifts of the NCAA. Now, is that decision, like, I don't think all of our listeners fully understand the difference when we hear things like NCAA or ACHA, and they hear Div 1, Div 2, Div 3. Maybe before we just go into our last question, before we talk about the eligibility and how it's going to look in the future, can you just tell us the difference between, like, with college hockey?
Yeah. So easy. So think of NCAA as the pinnacle of college hockey, NCAA Division I. That's where all the BU, BC, Denver's, all those good teams, North Dakota, that's where they live. Division II is very weird in NCAA hockey. There's only, I want to say at last I checked, there was only like 15 teams. It's not really a big division. It's not really even talked about. It goes pretty much down to Division III, and then there's a ton of Division III teams. And they have their own, all three of those divisions have their own national championship, okay? There's a lot of Division III teams. This is the other odd thing. That could probably be competitive at the very low Division I level. It's all based on the divisions are separated. So D1 is obviously they can hand out full academic scholarships. D2, D3, they cannot do that, okay? So then after you get rid of those NCAA, D1, D2, D3, it goes to the ACHA, which used to be considered club hockey, okay? That's what the term club or, club hockey is. But it's developed and evolved so much that since it's become ACHA and been so competitive, you've actually seen teams graduate from ACHA to becoming NCAA teams. So you can think of it almost as like a feeder system for the NCAA. Some of these teams have gone to D1. That's where you got Arizona State. They started the Sun Devils. They started off as an ACHA team. When you saw UNLV that they actually beat an ACHA team, I think they beat Denver in a shootout in overtime earlier this year. So you had an ACHA team beating an NCAA D1 team.
Wow.
The former national champs, actually, in a shootout. So
Wow.
they're about to go NCAA, UNLV. So these teams are progressing out of the ACHA to actually NCAA teams. So there's a lot of talent at those lower levels that is starting to burst through onto the NCAA scene. Now you go down below that to the junior levels, and I can't start to explain that roadmap because the USHL and all that stuff, it starts to get really haywire after that. And that's part of the problem with hockey in the United States is that the junior levels have expanded the pay to play. There's players and there's payers, one of my friends likes to say. And there's a lot of people out there willing to be payers to be sitting along with the players. And that just muddies the water. So hopefully that shed some light onto it. I hope I was clear about it, but ask any questions off that.
No, for sure. So I guess the question to follow up quickly is, what advice are you giving these 16 to 8-year-olds in high school, or maybe it's 15 when they're starting up, in terms of getting ready for that next step in their education or in their level of progression or professionalism in hockey, if that's what they want to pursue? How would you guide and navigate them? And where do you see these programs potentially going in the next 2 to 3 years?
Got to be training year round. I know everybody's going to say, no, you can't train year round. And when I say train year round, I mean you can't be away from it for 12 months. Okay. Yeah, you should play baseball. You should play the other sports. If you want to do something else, I understand. We got a lot of here. The common thing is lacrosse. It's a great crossover sport. So you got a lot of NCAA lacrosse players that are playing hockey, NCAA hockey players that are playing lacrosse. So at the high school level, so that's good. That's a good crossover sport. So I tell them train, stay on the ice as much as possible, even if you can play on a tournament team over the summer. Be realistic about your goals. Okay, like I talk about the talent being pressed down. That's how you have to look at it. You got to be your biggest advocate. There's so much talent that you got to start sending your videos out to coaches, send letters of interest out to these ACHA coaches, send them your schedule, be a pest until you hear back from them, because you have to advocate for yourself. And that's really the best way to get out there and maybe do some damage for yourself. Go out and go to some of these ID camps and decide what path you want to take. Are you going to take the juniors path? Are you going to try to go right to college and try to play ACHA again, which is tough? Are you going to look at the prep school path? Are you going to post grad for a year? What are the financial constraints related to that? So I start speaking this into the thought process, I would say middle school, freshman year.
It's interesting, some of the stuff that you're saying is, I mean, what we're getting when we have scouts on the show, and we're asking them, what are the best routes? Where do you go? Does it really matter? Should you do the higher? You want to play in the highest leagues, which is great for your personal challenges. And generally speaking, what all scouts say, all the way up to the pro scouts and their drafting in the amateur draft, even the NHL, they're all like, hey, the character, stuff you talked about early on, and the rest is just play to the best of your ability and you'll be found if you're good, and okay, so extending, last question then, to just let you, what do you see happening with the amount of teams in Div 1 now with the change? Because there's going to be a lot more players. Are you envisioning something? I know I'm hearing now.
I would think it. Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, no, so I'm hearing right now a lot of stuff and the heat coming out of some of the boards and stuff with places like when we're talking about USC and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be like that, but I think that there's a lot of, I would like to see them, and this is just me being king for a day, so ignore any thoughts of reason, but I would like to see them offer the ability of any D3 team that's maybe earned it or won a couple national championships, the ability to move up. Now, granted, so that doesn't always work for everybody, because just because you're D3 doesn't mean you aspire to be D1, but I would like to see some of those teams that maybe are on the cusp of that get that opportunity before USC rolls in and becomes a D1 team on day one just because they're USC. And that's not going to provide necessarily the greatest hockey, because you want to spread the game across the country.
Fair.
And we have some comments from people tuning in right now. Zilstra says, thanks, Jesse. Great share. Grant shared a little bit earlier. Love that Craig Janney sweater, coach. And then Jordan said 50 is the new 30. So,
all right. I appreciate that stuff. And Craig Janney, played in the rink I grew up in, and he's my all-time hero. He's the GOAT, greatest player ever from the state of Connecticut, except for I'm going to say he is, but a lot of people say Brian Leach or Chris Drury. So, and he played high school hockey in Connecticut as well. Craig Janney, Chris Drury, Brian Leach, they all played high school hockey in Connecticut. That's another thing I like to remind kids on the podcast. Like, you come from a state where a lot of legends played. There's some good hockey that came out of the state of Connecticut. Be proud of being a high school hockey player from the state of Connecticut.
That's great to hear.
Well, so much. Thank you, Coach Jesse. Coach Peters, as you call it on the show. So, guys, you can check it all out. The Hockey High School Podcast with Coach Peters. Follow him at CTHS Hockey Pod, as well as check out our former guests. We're going to be putting them up there shortly, so you can be able to see where and you can be able to follow them. And again, let's touch base. Let's talk some stuff around coaching strategies.
Yeah, let's do it.
Have some fun playing some armchair coaching as we start maybe approaching into the playoff time and stuff like that.
All right, boys. Thank you so much for having me on. We'll talk soon.
Cheers.
Take care. Good night.
Guest headliner, brought to you by JR Web Design. Is your website stuck in the Stone Age? Well, you need JR Web Designs. They'll craft you a website that's as awesome as our show.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jesse, for coming onto the show and sharing your wisdom and insight. It's great. Again, there are so many great people in the game of hockey, and we want to recognize and honor them. And we appreciate Jesse for coming on and sharing his experience. Go check out his podcast. Go reach out to him. He's got some great insight. He knows what's up. He knows how to play the game of hockey. All right, Evan, where do you want to get to? Because we have a lot to cover.
I was thinking, I love how Jesse, you can tell the guy does his podcast and how he works the game. We've been wanting to release, and we haven't found ourselves a coach to occasionally do what we call bench talk. Jesse, if you catch this later part, or I'm going to send something out to you, it might be something we can talk about, and you can come on and do some breakdown of analysis of some of the coaching going on in junior college and NHL hockey. So, okay, well, let's go ahead and let's get in, because with the trade deadline here, why don't you start us off and start walking through some of the trades that have happened this past few days, and then from there, let's get into the trade talk. We'll move to Around the Rink. Any other NHL news before we wrap up with hockey history?
So it just was announced a few moments ago while we were on interviewing Jesse that the Penguins have traded Michael Bunting to Nashville, to the Predators, for Luke Schenn and Tommy Novak. There is a pick involved as well there. I'm trying to figure out which one it is. So it looks like Nashville's going into a rebuild, while Pittsburgh, I don't know what they're doing, but your thoughts on this trade?
Okay, so I don't have that in front of me yet. So you're saying, let me just kind of do a quick poll.
Oh, and they also, Pittsburgh traded Vinny DeHarnay for a 5th-round pick in 2028.
They need D in Pittsburgh. Maybe they're trying to make a push for a little bit further. It's interesting. Bunting's been one of their better players, though.
Yeah, and he's had good chemistry with Malkin, so I'm surprised they got rid of him. It's the 2026 4th-round pick.
But maybe they're looking for Novak for that center depth, though, with this. I mean, this is like a little bit more of a minor trade, but interesting enough, they also just picked up on defense. So they just got Luke Schenn. Plus, just earlier at about 6:16, they made a trade with the San Jose Sharks and picked up Vincent Desharnais.
Yes.
And they moved out their 5th round, but they also picked up in this draft. So they picked up their 2020. I'm just making sure I got my number. Their 2028 5th round. Oh my gosh, that's way down. And they picked up their 2026 4th round. So that kind of evens out 2 years later.
I don't know what's happening in this trade. This makes no sense, but okay, sure.
Okay.
I thought Luke Schenn would go to a contender as a depth defenseman, right-handed shot. I know there's been talk about him and his brother being reunited, but St. Louis really has a heavy price for Braden Schenn. He is their captain. They're making a playoffs push. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And Zolster says Pens don't know what they're doing. I really don't know what they're doing. I honestly don't know.
Well, actually, they don't know what they're doing. And here's the other team. We'll talk about them a little later, but no trade yet. And we'll talk about the trade possibilities is the Canucks. Their former GM over there now is the president of hockey operations, and their former associate GM.
Jim Rutherford.
Yeah. So, all right.
Now,
Where's
speaking of close to home, Edmonton. I want to talk a little bit quickly about Edmonton. We did have we did talk about it last week. You guys can go back to that episode and
the
check
first
it
trade?
out. It was a pretty insightful episode. But it looks like Edmonton has traded for Trent Frederick, and I'm referring to Bruce McCurdy, who's a local writer, Cult of Hockey here. It looks like Trent Frederick has been traded in a three-way trade to Edmonton from the Boston Bruins, which the New Jersey Devils facilitated, because it sounds like Jack Hughes is out more long term, which is a big impact for them. But going the other way for from Edmonton was essentially Scott LaChance, who was never going to sign in Edmonton. He has played in the Eastern States, and his father is one of the directors of U.S. Scouting for New Jersey. As well as Max Waller, one of the higher prospects for Edmonton.
Max Waller, that's a bit of a surprise. They gave up.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, and a few picks. But of course, Fredericks is still injured. He's on IR, so he may be back only in a few weeks' time. You don't know. They still have an uncertainty with Evander Kane. They're coming off a bad loss versus Anaheim, 6-2. They look like they're spinning their wheels, Evan, and I think if they don't get a goalie or they don't fix up something, they're going to have a hard time going deep in the playoffs. They'll make the playoffs, but they'll have a hard time going deep.
I know a lot of fans of the Oilers are wanting them to get a goalie, or team places. People are saying, "Hey, we like to see them back just for seeing the superstars in the playoffs." But they're not getting a goalie. They're fine with Pickard as a backup, and they believe in Stewart Skinner, and they're living or dying with it. And it's going to affect them. We said it to start the season. I had said that they'll make the playoffs, but I can't. Second round max is where they're going, unless they get a top 4 D, and their goalies actually have to play much better during the regular season, let alone playoffs. And it's been a terrible season. So tired of people covering up for the goaltending there. I saw a lot of the reports. Former guest over a year ago, Paul Amita, with his travel company. He actually throws polls out there, and they're saying like 45, 46% say goalie, 42, 43% say that it's actually a top 4D. It's what's needed. And it's interesting. They go out and like Trent Frederick is fast and he's tough. That's a great pickup as in a depth. They don't need depth. They need better goaltending. And if they're not changing that, you better get a top 4 right side D guy that's going to play well. Everything else
reeling from the loss of Holloway and Broberg, and whether or not it was going to work out, that was youth and speed up front and in the back end, and you lost it. Say what you want about Broberg not wanting to be here. You had an opportunity to keep at least one of them. It is what it is. We'll see what happens with Evander Kane. Speaking of a few random names, I know that with Vancouver, Carson Soucy has been out there for a while.
Did we get all the names out there? Let's cover the other major trades already. Seth Jones, let's talk about that.
Seth Jones, yes. So Seth Jones went over to Florida with 25% retention by Chicago, and in return, they got a pick and Spencer Knight, the young rookie goaltender. Now, he's played quite a few games already. He played his first game a couple nights ago, stopped 41 out of 42, had a great interview post-game and talked about how he enjoyed playing there. He's gone through his own struggles being in the Players Assistance Program, just with the anxiety and so much going through things. It's a lot of pressure to play at a high stage. Chicago is rebuilding. They're trying to find new pieces. And in Florida, I think Seth Jones is going to succeed. I'll let you touch on it. But I think he's going to fit in there, especially since Ekblad needs to be re-signed. Will he, won't he? But he won't have to play as many minutes as he did in Chicago, where he was playing up to north of 25, 26 minutes a night, Evan, and it was weighing on him, and he was a lot. And even when he was in Columbus, Evan, if you recall, he played with Zach Werenski, who right now is having a Norris caliber year, but he was able to kind of be sheltered there and be protected. Plus, they had Bobrovsky, they had some other elite players in Columbus. So it was tough in Chicago. I know he had some post-game comments that, kind of were taken. And he indicated that he would either go there or Dallas, given his history around Dallas. And it looks like he went to Florida, and he has a chance potentially to win a Stanley Cup again with the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I know some people are saying he was toxic in the dressing room. I always say, does it look like that? Maybe it does. But remember, unless you're actually talking to the players or some team staff that know what it's like, they're all just rumors. And so just like the Corey Perry things, just like the Evander Kane, be careful. this is a better way of. Just recently, I started looking at things differently. You know, if you tap into this show and you follow us during an NHL segment, and you'll say, "You guys aren't hockey talk; you're NHL talk." Here's the thing: if you watch the whole show, it tells a story. But if you watch one scene, it doesn't, right?
100%.
So I understand that you're only getting to hear from one side or this. It might be the right one. Sometimes you do get the right scene that represents the entire story. But I just like to say that I think this is a good move. I'm focused on Chicago. I like the rebuild. I like the younger. I think going to a team with some of these younger guys, they're going to get an incredible top 3 minimum, top 3 pick, which is going to be outstanding. Like a Misa, a Schaefer, maybe a Porter Martone, and or James Higgins. One of these 4 guys, any of those guys are going to help shape that franchise. Artem Levshenov, I can't even say his name again. It's been a little while since last year. Their big defenseman. He's going to have another year behind him. You know, and so I think they want a centerman so that they can kind of play a little bit deeper.
Sam Bennett.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about that. That could be a potential because they're not going to be able to afford. So I'm really excited. And let's look at the goaltending now, because now you have Mrazek and Zoderboom. One of those is going by the trade deadline. That's my prediction right now in the next 2 days. Chicago's going to unload the goalie here. I can't see them going with 3 deep. They have a chance to build on something.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the Florida Panthers, we know that they also traded for Vitek Vanacek out of San Jose for forward Patrick Gillis. So again, just to kind of bolster that depth behind them, that's what they want. And usually we've talked to Tab Bamford, who is on Twitter/X, and he has been on the show in previous seasons, is really dialed into the Chicago team. So go check him out. One other trade that kind of happened today in the last little bit, where the Tampa Bay Lightning acquiring Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gord, as well as the defenseman Kyle Ochoin. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm pulling an Evan. And a 5th-round pick in the 2026 draft in the 3-team trade with Seattle and Detroit. Seattle gets Michael Easimont, a second 2020 pick in 2025, second-round pick, a conditional first in 2026, and a conditional first in 2027. And Detroit acquires a conditional 4th round in 2025. So it looks like Tampa Bay, who's rolling this year, is going for it again, and they're going to try to compete for one more Stanley Cup. They already went in all on Getzel and got rid of Stamkos. It seems like they really believe in the team, and they're firing on cylinders. And why can't they win? The big one will be, can they get past the Panthers? That's going to be their big haul. I think that's where the challenge will be. Can you get past the Panthers?
Michael Easimont. So you know, that's interesting, because a lot of people were feeling they were down and out, and they always seem to find a way to keep rebuilding on the fly. People question Stamkos out. Well, look what's happened in Nashville. Don't know if it was hurt. It was just a psychological thing, a change of scenery, different type of play. But Getzel does what Getzel does, and he does Getzel things. And that was a good signing now. It's looking excellent on their part. And now they're looking like a top 8 contender. And I actually think they're better than the Panthers, because the Panthers, if you're without Tkachuk going into the playoffs, if he's not ready or he's not properly healthy, he's gone through a lot these last 2 years.
A groin injury and whatnot. And it looks like there's a little bit of questions about the medical staff out in Minnesota, just in terms of what happened with Team USA and just how things were approached. But it will be interesting to see how we move forward with that. Now, Minnesota Wild.
Did I just say this? You were just saying, because we're talking about Tkachuk and how it was handled, and there's about the medical staff. But wasn't it Brady Tkachuk, his brother, who was complaining about the Canucks medical staff?
Yes, yeah, he was. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Speaking of Minnesota, they reacquired Gustav Nyquist again from Nashville for a 2nd-round pick in 2026. Quick thoughts there. I mean, they need depth. They're also against the cap. A lot of their guys are injured. They've really been. I think Jonas Brodin is still out. Kaprizov, I don't know if he's back. That team has been ridden with injuries. Eriksson Ek was injured for a bit. I don't know if he's close to returning. Minnesota fans, you guys can let us know. But again, another one of those smaller trades. And then the big one on March 1st that took place was Colorado acquiring Jimmy Vesey and defenseman Ryan Lindgren and Hank Kempf from the Rangers in exchange for Calvin DeHaan, UC Parasainen, and a conditional second and fourth round pick in the 2025 draft. Your thoughts on there? Because I think Colorado got the better player, and it sounds like Gabriel Landeskog won't be coming back in the regular season. Maybe the playoffs. I highly doubt it, but it sounds like I think his career could be done, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, all I'll say is Ryan Lindgren, it's interesting. Even on a bad team, he's a plus, plus minus. I don't put a lot of stat into it, but the guy's never been a minus player in the seasons, including this year with his move over there. He's still at a +1, and he's been on a terrible team that is letting a lot go by. Nothing on the goalie even is what they're dealing with. But, I always find it interesting. People say, we're dollar for dollar, especially a lot of Canadian teams. We can't move contracts. We got no move clause. New York does it all the time. Other groups like Florida, like a lot of these American groups do it all the time. There's got to be something up around this. I'm sure if you're a fan and your team keeps saying, we can't move players or we can't get – and look what they're getting for these players. A team like Edmonton, I'm sure, would love a Ryan Lindgren, but they can't get him yet. They gave up a second round to get what they have. That second round was needed to get themselves a top 4 guy. I struggle. Anything that's a third line, fourth line, anything that's a third line D, top 4 D, top 6 forwards, and or a top goalie, you save all your first and seconds for those. The team also had a policy: we don't get rid of first and seconds if we're getting people with no term, and he's got no term left. So the team has changed. I feel the Oilers are going backwards. I know if you're an anti-fan of them, you're probably pretty happy. Like I said, they'll be lucky to get out of the first round. The second round, they're probably gone unless something changes by the deadline. So if you're an Oilers fan, you're crossing your fingers. If you're a Rangers fan, you're probably looking at the return and you're kind of looking and saying, man, what did we really get? They got Calvin DeHaan. They had him before. They just picked up some draft picks in this. So I think this is them saying, hey, we're giving in.
Well, they gave up a first for JT Miller, right? A conditional. So it looks like that's kind of the thing. And
term, right? So they were okay with
100%, understand. And Vancouver didn't retain. So and then Jordan says sometimes you got to give up higher picks for role players. Agreed.
Yeah, you do if you have a Stanley Cup contending team. They don't got a Stanley Cup.
If you believe you're a Stanley Cup contending team, right?
Well, that's not Stanley Cup defense.
Well, yeah, but they made it to the Final Four last year, and so
but they had a whole different team last year. We can go back into that, right?
100%. And one final thing that it was just announced was that Alex Kerfoot has re-extended with the Utah Hockey Club for a 1-year, $3 million, just reported in. So that's happening. Good for Utah. I know they still want to make a big splash. I know the market, and we'll get into this next week if we have any more clarity, is what's happening with Mikko Rantanen and Carolina. Will he, won't he? There is an offer there. He just needs to decide, and they need to determine whether or not they're going to continue with him or if they're going to trade him again. We'll see what happens there. And Jordan says every team does it for the role players paying higher picks. I mean, it depends on how desperate you are, right? How desperate the GM is. And Yanni Gord is going to play third line, and they gave up a first. Yeah, Tampa Bay doesn't care about picks. Tampa Bay's going all in. But you remember the Tanner Jeannot trade, and it was egregious what they gave up for him, and he's no longer even there, right? I mean, he's in LA, right? So I mean, he's had a fresh slate, and so
you only give up those early round picks when you don't have bigger spots to fill. That's what my point is. And is that the Jordan who told me last week that Matthew Schaefer's already back playing? Hello, Jordan. Okay. Anyway, we'll get to that a little bit later on. Okay, let's
move over.
Let's talk about some stuff around the trade talk. So a couple of people I just want to hit in on. Let's talk around Boston, what they're doing. Let's talk about Chuba, Braden Shen, Bessner. You already kind of mentioned a little about Carson Soucy. What's happening? Dylan Cousins, Ryan O'Reilly, Erik Karlsson, Raquel, Alexiak, Tanev, Joel Armia. Let's start hitting around some of these. Where do you want to start?
Sure. Well, so with Brock Bessner, he was offered a 5-year by $8 million by Vancouver. That kind of was at the beginning of the season, according to Elliot Friedman. Nothing has really moved since. It looks like he may or may not move. We'll see what happens. But the two sides haven't talked. And he's a UFA at the end of the season. And Vancouver needs scoring. I know that Elias Pettersson has struggled going. And you need wingers. You need players to play. I like their defense. And if, Demko can come back healthy, you have a good goalie tandem with Lankinen and him. Again, big if with the health. But then if you can bolster up your what's it called? Your forward group, and you have some good pieces, then you can really be competitive. But the problem is that you need those goal scorers. Where's it coming from, right? And Jordan says, I wasn't on last week, sadly. Sorry, Evan.
Wasn't he on last week, or was it the week before, Jordan?
It was the week before. It was the week before.
Matthew Schaefer is already back playing. I actually can go back to the comments and find it for you, buddy.
So that's what I see with Vancouver. But what are your thoughts there? Because you talked about Jim Rutherford and what he's able to do, and that he doesn't sit idly by.
Yeah, no, they're going to shake something up. Nothing's going to happen with Pettersson. You're going to lose too much on this deal. They can't do that. The other thing is, like Bessner, they're going to wait till the off season. I can't see them moving. It's just lukewarm interest right now. So there's not much. I think Susie and maybe something that is not a player that's of any significance in any top kind of top 75% of the team lineup, right? You're not really dealing with. It's going to be more depth guys, maybe a few draft picks, a little kind of moving around on stuff like that. So that's kind of what I think is what we're actually looking at right now with them. What I am interested in is Armstrong with Braden Shen, because he doesn't really want to unload him, but they do need to make some talk around that. Jordan just can't let that one go. Okay, Jordan, I'll go back and I'll find it for you. And if you said that McQueen was back, he wasn't, because he just got back yesterday. And Caden, I'm the one that announced it last week on the show that he was back skating. So I don't know, Jordan. Maybe it's because you should know more about McQueen, though. You probably didn't know about Matthew Schaefer because it's OHL and you don't follow that. Just so you guys know, me and Jordan have a thing going on with
good little banter. It's a good little.
That's why he loves to on the show, so he can actually start.
He's gonna have to replace me. That show is gonna be off the rails if you two go off on each other.
You off, Val, and just enjoy.
Battle Royale, Rumble Royal, WWE style, like we just saw in Toronto, where it's going to be John Cena.
I do remember our highest watch show ever, and this was in season 2. I think it was season 3 was when we had both Jordan and Zylstra on, and I've got some sort of. Hey, those guys drinking at the bar don't count, buddy.
Twitter doesn't count.
But when Jordan and Zilch are on, that show, within 2 days, they had 30,000 views arguing over fighting in hockey. You and I have tried to replicate that fighting argument, and we don't get those hits anymore. So maybe we need to bring Jordan and Zil to, and we'll just sit back and laugh.
It was a highly UFC rated fight.
Okay, back to Braden Shen. So there is interest. Toronto and Jersey are two of the main people that have interest, but the price, he's not going to let him go cheap. I mean, I think it's a good move, but Armstrong really likes Shen, and right now they're on that verge of being able to get into that wild card spot. So does he keep him? Does he not? I think as long as he gets the right price, he'll do it. But I just don't see someone stepping up to the plate. Toronto would be the team, and I don't think they got what it takes for Armstrong to make it.
It'd be tough. I know that they've already been talking with Philadelphia Flyers for Scott Lawton, and I know that they even it was announced that Danny Briere and the team wanted, I believe it was Fraser Minton, I believe it is the rookie center or one of the other centers that played for the World Juniors this past. Christmas, and that was a flat out no from Toronto. Speaking of one of Toronto's rivals, Boston, Don Sweeney has been telling other teams that if you want players, you got to step up to the box, but they're not just giving them away. And I know that people talked about Brad Marchand, but he's staying in Bruin. And unless something happens right away, I think he's staying in Bruin for the rest of the season, and he'll probably sign an extension in the off season. He is still injured for a bit. And given that Boston isn't really competing for a playoff spot this year, they're going to try to get back to it next year. They're not going to sit, again, on their hands and wait to see what happens. And you mentioned Pittsburgh and EK, and I know that there was an interview with Kyle Dubas and potentially trading Erik Karlsson. He's had a good season this year on a struggling team. I know that if maybe Pittsburgh retains a bit more, that 10.9 or whatever it is million would be dropped a bit more. Maybe a contender takes a chance on him, but I don't think so. It's too many more years left.
Yeah, well, the only possibility, like, has been out there and that he'd be open would maybe be an Ottawa return. Is that possible? Yeah. Pittsburgh, like, what are they going to send Pittsburgh to make it work, though? Because
I wouldn't do it if I was Ottawa. You have too many good young players coming through, and you're doing well.
Yeah, unless they feel like he can actually fill that role that they need on that line. But I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're also considering Ricard Raquel, if the move is right. But what's it called? But we'll see what happens there. I see Edmonton being a good fit, but that's just what I've been hearing. Rumblings.
Yeah, Raquel. That could be. Who I'd like to talk about is south of Edmonton, down in Calgary. They're buyers right now, and Craig Conroy is going at this, and they are still interested and still in talks, trying to see what can move for Dylan Cousins. That is still, he is not the player that they signed still, but is it just needs a fresh start? Conroy believes that it can work there. Question is what do they have? Because Buffalo's not looking to rebuild. They're even though they're kind of look like they're in a rebuild with their where they're drafting every year and where they're placing, but right now the Buffalo Sabres are really in the spot. They want a hockey trade. So yeah, unless maybe now this is kind of a weird look, and they haven't wanted to let go of Rasmus Andersson. Maybe do you bring Cousins in and move Rasmus Andersson out as a player that Buffalo can work with more of a solid defensive defenseman who's big, tough, and rugged, and then they can trade Bowen Byron out. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I know that they've floated Nazem Kadri's name around, so that could be a piece going back. Buffalo really needs to get its house in order, because you can't keep firing the coach. You can't keep changing the GM. You can't keep getting rid of players who go on to win the Stanley Cup with other franchises. The fans need something, and you need some stability. And I don't know how they went from almost being in the playoffs by only a couple of points short last year to what we're seeing this year. They just really went just enough to be like, hey, this is great, to falling apart. And Jordan says maybe Connor Zary and Yeager for Cousins. Will be interesting to see if that's something that they
Zary and who?
Connor Zary and Yeager. Sharangovich.
Whoa, I know they love him there, but he hasn't had the same year he had last year with his breakout there.
And it sounds like they want to Buffalo wants to re-sign, if they haven't already. They're looking close to re-signing Jordan Greenway, who's been on the back end there.
That you know what, Jordan, I'm still stuck on that trade. I know Calgary will no, but then remember, you're still getting a good player that's young, that is already signed to a long term, and if you got to build. As much as you love Zary, I love Zary, but Zary is not like lighting it up like it's yesterday, and he is already a few years into his career here. So that's interesting. So, well, just looking at the time, we have only a few things. Why don't we go to a couple things around the rink? If you're a fan of hard-hitting, exciting hockey, catch the Kalkaska Battlers.
Around the Rink
is brought to you by the Kalkaska Battlers. Let them be your local hockey heroes.
All right, around the rink. What do you want to get to?
Yeah. So for those, we get quite a few of you that are coming in from Saskatchewan, Canada. So they're in your junior hockey league, so in junior A hockey in the SJHL. So the La Rouge Ice Wolves, they are moving into a new ice arena. So this is the interesting piece, because there's been talk that this team could not continue to survive. They might get moved. They need a newer arena, and so now what's happened is they're moving from what was called the Male Hagelin Uniplex to a much larger and newer at the J. I don't know what it stands for, guys. You guys know if you're from Saskatchewan, the JRMCC Arena next season. It's larger. There's more happening, more entertainment. It's going to be better for the community. But it looks like this move has now ensured that the La Rouge is not in doubt of moving their franchise anywhere else. So the Ice Wolves will continue. The other news, we were just talking about Matthew Schaefer. So Jordan's saying he didn't say anything of the liking. So maybe it's me, and I was debating with another Jordan or someone else that I'm just got to mention now. But the Erie Otters of the OHL of the Canadian Hockey League, top draft pick Matthew Schaefer. Some have him rated anywhere from 1 to 4 in the draft. Most of them are in the top 2. But anyway, he is scheduled to resume skating next week. I do not have him ranked in my top. We're not covering my Revs top 15, and the reason I don't is he started good. I think there was a recency bias going into the Team Canada. He got hurt. He has not got back. They only have 9 remaining games. He still is just going to resume skating. So what's he going to get? 5, maybe 6 games, and we're going to judge an entire season on 25 to 30 points. I can't see this guy going number 1, man. That's a huge risk. I kind of feel like it was the year Seth Jones went. Everyone talked about how he was going to be not Nathan McKinnon. He could actually challenge Nathan McKinnon. I don't think that's going to happen. If he had played a full season and could have continued at his performance very well, but whoever gets him, they're getting a phenomenal player. And then talking about injuries, also in the top rankings, he's dropped in mine recently just because I can't see him being able to get himself. I'm worried about how bad this injury was, and that was Roger McQueen. He just got back for the Brandon Wheat Kings yesterday. I don't have my numbers down here. I believe that he had only played around 8 games. So he just got in against the Rebels. So his first game last night, he gets ejected because he came in on a hit, and the guy turned last second. Again, Here we go. Junior hockey. Turning last second, youth hockey, turning last second. They're doing this way too much, buddy. So, Pawel, as we've talked about, I am so tired of players putting them in vulnerable positions to draw a call. So we don't know. He didn't get any points last night with Roger. I don't think he's gonna take, but he's only gonna get himself another 8 to 10 games that is going to be possible for the season. And then just the last thing, I don't really have a lot around the NHL on the KHL this week. Next week, I'm going to give you guys some more stuff, what's going on. But there's a playoff push. Yes, the playoffs already are happening. As the trade deadline comes, the KHL is getting ready in the playoff push. So their current focus is on those races leading into. So there's a lot of battling for positions in the KHL. And that's around the rink.
That's around the rink.
If you're a fan of hard-hitting, exciting hockey, catch the Kalkaska Battlers.
Around the Rink
is brought to you by the Kalkaska Battlers. Let them be your local hockey heroes.
All right, we're in the final minute, the final countdown, as Europe sang about. Where should we kind of finish off with the show?
Do you want to cover any other NHL news for yourself before I go into hockey history?
I think pretty much like it's going to be busy. There's a lot going on, a lot of reporting. I know you kind of wanted to allude that Jamie Alexiak and Brandon Tanev out in Seattle are going to be expected to be moved out. That's something that they're considering, and they're willing to retain on Brandon Tanev up to 50%. It's not been the year Seattle has wanted, and they got to be competitive if a basketball team from the NBA is going to come in and compete for those eyeballs and those dollars. And I believe Joel Armia is being shopped for the Canadians. I believe they re-signed Jake Evans to a 4-year, $2.5 million cap hit. A good fourth liner, hard body, plays hard minutes. So good for Montreal. They're coming into Edmonton tomorrow night. Should be competitive. But that's pretty much it. I'm excited about what's going on. So why don't we get to your hockey history?
The Kalkaska Battlers presents Hockey History. Catch the Kalkaska Battlers as they compete in the APHL. Check the skills, speed, heart. Make sure you catch a game and experience the thrill of live hockey. Go Battlers!
Well, guys, exciting news in hockey history. The Philadelphia Flyers and the Ottawa Senators played a game on March 5th, 2004. It resulted in this record-breaking number of penalty minutes. You got to love those games that are just, they're a fight fest. Essentially, that's what we had. An NHL game between the Flyers and Senators. It is etched in hockey history because the unprecedented number of penalty minutes. Now, let me give you the breakdown. record-breaking penalties. The game resulted in 419 penalty minutes. It was set a new NHL record, with the Ottawa Senators, of all people. They surpassed the previous record of 406 that was in 1981. Love the fighting of the 80s. That was the bench-clearing brawl days. Now, the Flyers alone accumulated 213 of those minutes, which was a record for them, not considering they were the Broad Street Bullies. And the third period saw the staggering amount of those penalties mostly happening. Now, this is what happened. The tension leading up to the game had been stemmed from this previous encounter where Ottawa's Martin Havlat high-sticked Mark Recchi of the Philadelphia Flyers. And for you Flyer fans, you remember it resulted in a suspension for Havlat, and the Flyers were seeking retribution because that's how they played. And the game was relatively normal, but in the closing minutes, that's really when most things erupted. Now, the chaos began on a fight. This is how it started with Donald Brashear of the Flyers and Rob Ray of the Senators. Triggered a series of all these subsequent brawls involving nearly every player that was on the ice, including the goaltenders, the good old goaltender. Multiple fights broke out during the face-off. The crowd's reaction got fueled with all this intensity. The officials spent a lot of time trying to sort out. Anyway, this game became a legendary example of what was called old school hockey, characterized by the rivalry and the physical play. And it really highlighted that fierce nature of the Flyers and their reputation for toughness. It's a very clear example of how the NHL has changed, I think, over the years. But the final score of the game was Flyers 5, Senators 3. But it is a memorable event in NHL history.
In hockey.
The Kalkaska Battlers presents Hockey History. Catch the Kalkaska Battlers as they compete in the APHL. Check the skills, speed, heart. Make sure you catch a game and experience the thrill of live hockey. Go Battlers!
All right, Evan, that was a great story. You always know that when there's a brawl, people tune in and their eyeballs are glued to the TV. So great story. You guys have learned a little bit of hockey. This is coming up to the end of the show. It's been really fun again. Thank you to Jesse for coming on for the show and sharing his experience as a high school coach and insight into coaching and into development of players, especially young high school kids trying to find their way in the game and hopefully potentially one day a path to the NHL. Before we finish off, Evan, are there any final thoughts you wanted to share or bring up?
No, I think the one note is they're trying to work on an extension. Aaron Ekblad with the Panthers, but he wants 8 years. They apparently don't want, so we'll see how that pans out over the next weeks. Right now, trade deadline.
Yeah, trade deadline. We are going to be busy. Follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. We are going to be posting like crazy. Subscribe to all our platforms. We are on YouTube, on Instagram. Give us a like. We love hearing from you guys. Reach out to us. We love always connecting and talking all things hockey. Well, I guess, Evan, that's it for another wonderful episode, season 6 of 24. Again, we are past the halfway mark. We are just chugging along, and there's still a lot of hockey left. So I guess we'll be back next week, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time here. So make sure you tune in wherever you get us and wherever you're watching or listening from. We appreciate it. You guys make this job / hobby / production the best because you guys tune in and make it all happen.
And thanks to guys like you, Jordan. Thanks for the arguments. Thanks for the debate. And thanks for the
I love it. I love it.
We love it, guys.
We want to better our things. So, in the famous words of Ed Whalen, in the meantime, and in between time,
that's it.
Sticks on your ice. Stay safe. Have a good night. We appreciate you guys.